What happens when a liberal TV host tries to corner Barron Trump with a pointed question? No one expected his calm and composed response. Barron Trump, a figure who has largely stayed out of the public eye, surprised everyone with his rare TV appearance following his standout moment at the recent inauguration ceremony. The anticipation was palpable. Viewers tuned in not just out of curiosity about Barron's perspective but also to see how he would handle the famously provocative host. The studio was alive with energy, the audience buzzing as the young Trump heir walked onto the set. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, Barron exuded an aura of quiet confidence and maturity. At just 18 years old, his presence was commanding, reflecting a sense of calm that seemed to silence the chatter. His recent standing ovation at the inauguration had sparked countless debates, and tonight, he was here to address it all. The host, known for his sharp questions and bold commentary, was ready to challenge Barron. The audience leaned in, sensing that this wouldn't be an ordinary interview. The stage was set for a moment no one would forget. The audience reacted with a mix of emotions. Some clapped politely, acknowledging his presence. Others exchanged skeptical glances, clearly unsure of what to expect. As Barron took his seat across from Alex, his expression remained composed, his gaze steady. The stark contrast between the confident, experienced host and the calm, reserved guest only added to the tension in the room. The stage was set for what promised to be an unforgettable encounter. All eyes were on Barron as the interview began, the air thick with anticipation. The interview began with a polite exchange of pleasantries, the kind of surface-level warmth that masked the underlying tension. Alex Brooks, the host renowned for his sharp wit and challenging questions, leaned back in his chair, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. "So, Barron," Alex started, his tone friendly but with an edge that hinted at where he was heading, "it's not every day we see you in the spotlight. How does it feel, being thrust into the public eye after your father's recent inauguration?" Barron responded with calm confidence, his voice steady. "It's been an experience, for sure. But my focus has always been on supporting my family and staying grounded." The audience listened intently, some nodding in approval, while others waited for Alex to deliver the pointed question they knew was coming. It didn't take long. With a slight shift in his posture, Alex leaned forward, locking eyes with Barron. "Let's get straight to the moment everyone's been talking about. Barron, do you really think you deserved that standing ovation at your father's inauguration?" The question landed like a spark in dry grass, igniting murmurs from the audience. Barron paused briefly, his composed demeanor unshaken, as if weighing his response carefully. Alex, sensing an opportunity, pressed further. "I mean, some might say it's a lot for someone so young to receive such recognition. What do you think?" The air in the studio grew heavier, all eyes on Barron. The challenge was clear, but so was Barron's resolve. He straightened slightly in his seat, ready to respond, his calm gaze meeting Alex's sharp one. What he said next would set the tone for the rest of the interview. The question hung in the air, charged with tension, as the audience waited for Barron's reply. Alex Brooks leaned back slightly, a smug expression on his face, confident he had delivered a question designed to catch the young Trump off guard. But Barron didn't falter. Instead, he took a moment, his expression calm and thoughtful, as if carefully choosing his words. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and firm. "The standing ovation wasn't for me," he began, his tone exuding humility. "It was for what I represent, a generation that values service, respect, and the future of our country." The studio fell silent, the murmurs from the crowd evaporating as his words resonated. Barron didn't rush, his composed demeanor commanded attention. "That moment wasn't about me as an individual. It wasn't about Barron Trump. It was about the ideals and the hope that events like an inauguration symbolize. It was about honoring the people who serve this nation and recognizing that, no matter our differences, unity and respect can bring us together." Alex's smirk faltered slightly, but he quickly tried to regain control. So you're saying the standing ovation wasn't personal? That it was more about the occasion, he probed, his tone carrying a hint of skepticism. Barron nodded. Exactly. When people applauded, they weren't applauding me as a person, they were applauding what my presence, at that moment, represented. A young person standing with pride for their family, their country, and for values that go beyond any single individual. It wasn't a personal achievement, it was a collective one. The young Trump's words struck a chord, and the audience seemed to lean in, captivated by his thoughtful response. He continued, shifting the focus from himself to the larger picture. When I walked onto that stage, I thought about the countless men and women who've worked tirelessly to uphold the values we hold dear: service, integrity, and commitment to a better future. That's what people were applauding. It wasn't about me, and it was never meant to be. Alex, visibly surprised by Barron's mature and measured response, leaned forward. But surely, Barron, you must feel some personal pride for receiving such recognition. After all, a standing ovation is a big deal. Barron's gaze remained steady as he answered, of course, it's humbling. But personal pride isn't the point. The point is what we can achieve together as a country. That ovation reminded me of the responsibility we all have to contribute to something greater than ourselves. It wasn't about personal validation, it was about representing a commitment to values that matter. The room was quiet for a moment, the audience seemingly absorbing the depth of his words. Alex opened his mouth as if to continue his line of questioning but stopped short, his usual confidence replaced by a flicker of hesitation. Barron's response had taken the narrative out of the host's hands and redirected it towards something bigger, a reminder of the principles that unify rather than divide. As Barron finished, the audience broke into applause, some rising to their feet, the irony not lost on anyone. Once again, Barron had earned a standing ovation, not through showmanship or bravado, but through humility, grace, and a quiet strength that left no room for doubt. Alex Brooks leaned forward in his chair, his expression sharpening as he prepared to take another shot at cornering the young Trump. His confidence seemed to return after Barron's composed response to the previous question, but there was now a trace of determination in his tone, a need to regain control of the narrative. Barron, Alex began, his voice steady but laced with a subtle edge, I can't help but wonder. Standing there at the inauguration, knowing the spotlight was on you, did you ever feel overshadowed by your father's legacy? I mean, let's be honest, being Donald Trump's son comes with a lot of expectations, doesn't it? The audience murmured quietly, sensing the provocation behind the question. Alex's words hung in the air, the implication clear: how could Barron, at just 18 years old, carve out his own identity under the immense shadow of his father, one of the most polarizing figures in modern history? Barron paused, his calm demeanor unwavering. He met Alex's gaze directly, his posture steady and composed. It's not about being overshadowed, he said firmly, his voice carrying a quiet strength that immediately silenced the murmurs in the room. It's about carrying forward values that matter, whether it's in a family or a nation. His words caught Alex off guard, and for a moment, the host hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Barron continued, his tone measured and thoughtful. Being part of a family, any family, means understanding that you're part of something bigger than yourself. My father's legacy isn't something that overshadows me, it's something that inspires me to think about what I can contribute, both to my family and to the world. The audience listened intently, the room now entirely focused on Barron. He spoke with a maturity and depth that belied his age. Legacies aren't about competing with the people who came before you, he said, his gaze steady. They're about building on the foundation they've laid. My father has his path, and I have mine. The two aren't in competition, they're connected by shared values, like hard work, perseverance, and a commitment to what you believe in. Alex leaned back slightly, his usual smirk replaced by a more contemplative expression. But surely, he pressed, it must feel like a lot of pressure. The expectations, the comparisons, they're unavoidable, aren't they? Barron nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the point. Pressure is part of life, he replied. But it's not about avoiding it, it's about how you handle it. My focus isn't on trying to live up to anyone else's expectations. It's on staying true to who I am and the principles I believe in. His words drew a ripple of applause from the audience, many of whom seemed impressed by his measured response. Barron's tone shifted slightly, becoming more reflective. At the end of the day, what matters isn't the comparisons or the noise around you. It's whether you can look in the mirror and know that you're doing your best to contribute something meaningful, to your family, to your community, and to the world. The applause grew louder, and even Alex seemed momentarily subdued, his attempt to push further falling flat against Barron's composed and articulate response. The young Trump's maturity and focus left no room for doubt. He wasn't overshadowed by his father's legacy, he was determined to create his own, built on values that mattered. The moment Barron finished speaking, the studio fell into a brief, stunned silence. His words, calm, measured, and profoundly thoughtful, seemed to hang in the air, leaving everyone, from the audience to the production crew, momentarily captivated. And then, the applause began. It started slowly, with a few claps scattered across the room, as if people were still processing what they had just heard. But within seconds, it swelled into a thunderous ovation. Rows of people rose to their feet, their admiration evident in their expressions. Some clapped with enthusiasm, while others nodded in silent respect, acknowledging the poise and wisdom with which Barron had handled himself. The camera panned across the audience, capturing their reactions, awe, surprise, and even a sense of pride in witnessing such composure from someone so young. A few individuals exchanged glances, as if to silently agree that Barron had exceeded all expectations. Even Alex Brooks, the seasoned host known for his sharp tongue and unflinching demeanor, seemed momentarily disarmed. The smirk that had been a constant fixture on his face throughout the interview faltered, replaced by an expression of genuine surprise. He leaned back in his chair, his pen still resting forgotten in his hand, as if searching for the next angle to regain control of the conversation. But for once, Alex didn't interrupt or try to redirect. He simply nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of the powerful response Barron had delivered. Behind the scenes, the producers scrambled to capture every moment. The sound of the applause was deafening, a rare and genuine show of respect in a setting often filled with division and debate. The production crew, many of whom had likely entered the night with their own preconceived notions, exchanged glances of astonishment. Barron, for his part, remained composed. He didn't bask in the applause or look smug about his accomplishment. Instead, he offered a small, humble smile, his posture still poised, his hands resting on his lap. He glanced briefly at Alex, as if to signal that he was ready for whatever came next, but his expression carried no malice or defiance, just quiet confidence. The applause lasted longer than anyone had expected, and when it finally began to die down, a few people in the crowd shouted words of encouragement. "Well said," one person called out. "Class act," said another. It was clear that Barron had won over not just the room but also the hearts of many who had been skeptical of him from the start. As Alex finally regained his composure and prepared to ask his next question, the tone of the interview seemed to shift. The power dynamic, once firmly in the host's favor, had subtly tilted. Barron Trump, with his calm and thoughtful responses, had managed to command the room, not through force or theatrics, but through grace, humility, and an undeniable sense of self-assuredness. In that moment it was clear to everyone watching that Barron wasn't just a figure living in the shadow of his family, he was carving out his own space, one thoughtful answer at a time. As Barron finished his thoughtful response, the studio was momentarily silent, as if the weight of his words had left everyone speechless. Then, like a ripple growing into a wave, the applause began. At first, it was scattered, a few claps here and there, as the audience absorbed the poise and maturity of the young Trump. But within seconds, it erupted into a thunderous ovation, filling the room with an energy that hadn't been felt all evening. Rows of audience members stood to their feet, their admiration evident in their faces. Some clapped enthusiastically, while others exchanged nods, silently acknowledging the depth and clarity of Barron's words. A few even turned to those beside them, whispering words of praise for his calm and measured demeanor. It wasn't just polite applause, it was genuine respect for how he had handled a challenging and provocative question with such grace. Even Alex Brooks, the host known for his sharp wit and pointed questioning, seemed momentarily taken aback. The smirk that had been his trademark throughout the interview faded, replaced by an expression of quiet surprise. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his usual air of confidence giving way to something more subdued. For the first time that night, Alex appeared to be at a loss for words. He watched the audience's reaction with a hint of hesitation, as if realizing that Barron had won over not only the room but also the narrative. Barron, however, remained composed. He didn't revel in the applause or make any grand gestures. Instead, he offered a small, polite smile, his posture steady, his gaze calm. He seemed to embody the very values he had spoken of: humility, respect, and the ability to rise above divisiveness. It was a rare moment of quiet confidence that made an even deeper impression on the audience. Behind the scenes, the production team exchanged glances of surprise, scrambling to capture every angle of the reaction. The applause was unrelenting, lasting longer than anyone had anticipated. Some audience members even shouted words of encouragement. "Well said," one person called out, while another added, "He's got more class than most politicians." When the applause finally began to die down, the room felt different. The energy had shifted, and it was clear to everyone present that Barron had not only held his own but had also commanded the respect of a room that hadn't been on his side at the start. Even Alex seemed to recognize that the interview had taken a turn he hadn't anticipated. Barron had turned a moment of provocation into one of unity, proving that grace and thoughtfulness could triumph over any attempt to corner him. As the applause faded and the interview drew to a close, one thing became abundantly clear: Barron Trump had demonstrated remarkable grace and composure under pressure. In the face of pointed questions and an attempt to provoke him, he remained calm, thoughtful, and dignified, turning the conversation into an opportunity to highlight values of humility, respect, and unity. His ability to stay grounded, even in the spotlight, was nothing short of impressive. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about Barron Trump's response? Do you agree with how he handled the tough questions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story and want more inspiring content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you stories that captivate, inspire, and leave you thinking long after the credits roll. Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.